Hello, everybody, and welcome into Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day. On this episode, I'm very excited to welcome Tom Luongo to the show, a former research chemist, libertarian, and Austrian economist whose work can be found on sites like Zero Hedge, Newsmax, and more. He is currently the publisher of the Gold Goats and Guns blog and podcast. Today we're going to discuss why all roads lead to London and how the power brokers in the UK are involved in driving global conflict and geopolitics. I'm also going to challenge Tom on his views of the Trump administration. Is there method to all the madness, or is this administration cooked? We're of course going to talk about Trump going after Obama. Will we ever see the former president actually put behind bars, or is this all a distraction from the Epstein list? We're going to dive into the digital euro and the EU's Readiness 2030 plan. Is the EU set to collapse like the Soviet Union? All of this and so much more. Commodity Culture now has merch. Get your hat, hoodie, mug, or t-shirt backed by a 100% quality guarantee using the link in the description below. And now, my friends, strap yourselves in for my conversation with Tom Luongo. Tom Luongo, great to have you back on Commodity Culture. I want to start the conversation off with the expression, all roads lead to London. This is something you talk about a lot. This is something another frequent guest on the show, Alex Craner, talks a lot about as well. And I've spoken with both of you about the UK's influence on geopolitics and the global economy when discussing specific situations like the conflict in Ukraine. But I want to unpack this a little bit more. So give us the big picture. Who are the power brokers in London, and how do they exert their influence on the world?
The simple answer to that question is the old banking system, right? The all roads lead to London really starts with how they ran their mercantilist empire and the colonial empire for a couple hundred years, and in competition with the Dutch going back hundreds of years. So we realized that over the course of that time, they built an immense network of people around the world, banking and business relationships around the world. And that's really what All Roads Lead to London is about. You have to understand that the way I like to put it, is just kind of give a frame of reference. When you watch like a James Bond movie and they talk about some, financier that no one's ever heard of that runs that's running all this money laundering, or like Le Chiffre from Casino Royale, you realize that there's an entire world that exists that isn't on Wikipedia and that we don't interface with on a regular basis. And the great part about where we are now is that we know a lot more of their names than we used to. But, the old adage that, the real bankers don't have Wikipedia pages, it still matters. Like we don't, it's the same thing with like real mob bosses don't have, we don't know who they are either, right? So it doesn't matter who the individuals are. It's the networks and the relationships that they have. And those get reflected, we always see that as policy coming down the line afterwards. So the order makers hand the things off to the order takers, and then we get things like the Steele dossier, or we get things like, MI6, deeply embedded in our CIA, or, ginning up a conflict in Azerbaijan or on the India-Pakistan border or whatever. So that's what we're talking about. And then what Alex and I are talking about. And then when you understand why they do this, of course, the answer is they don't have any collateral. And that's why Europe has always built colonial empires. Europe doesn't have enough natural resources to continue to, quote unquote, rule the world or be a first world economy without having to go and get the collateral from somebody else. And of course, since they're Europeans, and I'm sorry, but I guess maybe I'm the most racist man in all geopolitics. Since they're Europeans, they go out and they conquer other people and they take their stuff. And that's, in a nutshell, many ways, the last 500 years of history. And we know that, and you can fill in the details and everything else, and everybody knows this. We're taught all this stuff, and then it's all of a sudden it's all been. And the worst part about this now is that all of this has been transferred to the United States. This is the thing that I think has really bothered me more than anything else over the last couple of years of really, seeing it the pic, seeing the world for the way it actually is, as opposed to the version of the world I used to have in my head. And I use the phrase all the time, don't be gaslit by morons. Well, the morons are in City of London, and they've gaslit us all into believing that the United States is the big evil empire in the world. Yeah, okay. If history began in 1999, sure. Or even 1949. But history didn't start in 1949, folks. It started a lot earlier than that. So we learn about all that, colonialism bad, and then immediately it gets transferred to the United States, and no one else could possibly be colonial anymore, because there can only be one colonial power in the world, right? Or there are two. There's the United States and China. And who's promulgating those narratives? And it's funny. The more I think about this, the more I realize it's very obvious that this is a classic example of everything that Alex and I have talked about for years, which is you shake the ant jar and you let everybody, you be on both sides of the conflict, and then you shake the ant jar and let everybody take sides. And I'm not interested in taking sides. I'm on the side of humanity, and unfortunately, that means I have to. And I'm an American. That means I have to now stop apologizing for all of our sins of the past, and now start atoning for them. And how you atone for them is not by paying reparations. It's by stopping the bullshit that you've been doing for the last 70, that somebody else has, got you doing. Like, seriously, we adopted British foreign policy. We adopted the British central banking system. We adopted tax and spend authority and centralized government. All of this crap. We look like them. And yeah, so why don't we stop doing that? And there's an infinite gulf, I think, and this is all set up because I know you always send me the questions beforehand, so I'm like, in some ways, I'm kind of setting up some of the questions that you're about to ask and some of the ways you're going to ask those questions, and I'm like, I just need to make it abundantly clear at this point that you can be a critic of the United States and of the past, and even a critic somewhat of the things that Donald Trump is doing right now, and at the same time also believe that it's not an expression of exactly the same thing you've always seen in the past under Condoleezza Rice and and Paul Wolfowitz and Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney, and I don't even like naming the presidents at this point, the people who actually ran that operation. So we've got a lot of gaslighting to unwind here, because this is a very interesting moment in time where everybody's looking to the United States, but no matter what move the United States makes, everybody's unhappy about it. So all roads lead to London. Guess what? Yeah. Because it's in their best interest as the weak man at the table, and I consider Europe the weak player at the table, including City of London, to get the stronger players to fight amongst themselves and to gaslight everybody into taking sides on one side or the other of all these stupid conflicts that they've created. And they have then they've set up, conveniently enough, one central narrative, which is not true, though it has elements of truth in it. And the best lies, the most persuasive lies, are the ones that have a core of truth to them, which is that what? The myth of Jewish omnipotence. We're going to leave it right there. We can go on, move on. We can move on. But that's really important, because once you see that for what it is and realize that, Israel's terrible. I've never been a fan of Israel. And what they're doing now is plainly horrific and against any norms of, not even an issue. But the hard part is realizing that they can be both the victim and the scapegoat for vaster powers. And that's the part that makes a lot of people just that squicks them out. And that's our job as commentators and as analysts. It's our job to face the hard truths about these things and ask those hard questions and break through the propaganda. So that's, and I'm sorry, but that serves Britain's purpose. It serves Europe's purpose to set everybody against each other, to undermine anybody who's a threat to their system, while they continue to work through their Gantt chart of the things that they need, they want to do, which is walk us like hogtied towards nuclear war over, a bunch of Ukrainian swampland. Really? Yeah, no. Like, that's my answer to that. And if in order to keep that from happening, yeah, there's going to be a lot of zigzagging along the way, and and that's why did Trump bomb Iran? Blah 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 blah.
And now a quick break to hear from our sponsor. ARC Silver Gold Osmium owner Ian Everard is considered one of the most honest and level-headed gold and silver dealers in the United States, praised even by his competitors. So give him a call today to take advantage of the specials right now. Silver Kangaroos 2023 1-ounce coins, mint fresh, only $2.47 over spot. Mint fresh silver maple leafs 2025 coins, 1 ounce, $2.87 over spot. While supplies last. Reach out today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And now, back to the interview. Well, let's jump to that next, because you, in terms of Trump as a president, you're probably one of the most positive guests on the show on the Trump administration thus far, at least in the last few conversations I've had with you. So I want to get your perspective on all the recent controversies coming out of the Trump administration. It looks to me like things are a total disaster. I come from the perspective of hating the political class across the board. So it's kind of funny because whenever I say something bad about Trump, I get a bunch of leftists cheering me on. And I'm like, no, I hate your guy too. but obviously the burying of the Epstein files is a huge issue. We talked about this last time you were on the show as well. And then Trump went on to claim they're a hoax created by the Democrats. We've got Trump letting Lindsey Graham run around the world, acting as president, and then following his plan, seemingly to place more tariffs, sanctions on Russia if they don't come to the negotiating table, reach a peace agreement with Ukraine. What I see is a pretty unprovoked bombing of Iran. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And of course, the undying support for Israel and Netanyahu as well, at least from the mainstream perspective. That's how everything looks to me. I know you have a different perspective on some of these things. Perhaps you can change my mind on some of my views. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Okay. Let's start with the basic one. I take extreme umbrage at the idea that the attack on Iran was unprovoked. I'm sorry. History did not start in whenever the Iranians started to try and schmooze the Americans into believing they were the good guys after 9/11. No, not that they were involved in 9/11, but after 9/11, all of a sudden Islam became the religion of peace. And I'm sorry, that's propaganda. I'm sorry, it's propaganda, folks. It is. So, it is. Now, not an unprovoked attack. Iran is pursuing a nuclear weapon, and Trump, as the leader as one of the leaders of one of the most powerful nations in the world, has every right to step in. I'm sorry, this is not very libertarian, folks, but libertarians are wrong about this. Has every right to step in and go, no, sorry, you don't get a nuclear weapon. I know a lot of people don't agree with me on this, and I don't care. You don't get a nuclear weapon. He didn't want North Korea to get to build a nuclear weapon either. And he tried to stop it. And the neocons in his administration scuttled all that. The John Boltons and whatnot. Who do they freaking work for? They work for the City of London. Because whose strategy is it to justify nuclear proliferation around the world in order to sow chaos and to keep all of these low-grade conflicts, these cultural conflicts, at a fever pitch whenever they need them to. You have to understand that the best way to understand the way the British operate, because they're communists, is the tall poppy thing that we accuse the Chinese of doing. The Chinese internally, the tall pop, they chop down the tall poppies and keep everybody equal. Well, I got news for you. That's British foreign policy, like 101. Whenever somebody starts getting big and too big for their britches or too big for them to control, they move in, use those old relationships to mutz with the political situation, overthrow, get rid of a government, bind it down with Lilliputians in Parliament or whatever they do. And if they need to gin up a conflict in order to move, this is what they do. Okay. And they've always done it. Okay. And I'm over being blackmailed with nuclear weapons, especially as Alex pointed out to me the last time he and I spoke about 3 weeks ago. In the world of pinpoint precision ballistic missiles and drone swarms, we don't need nuclear weapons anymore as a strategic means by which to keep countries from invading each other by blackmailing them with the threat of killing millions of civilians. We can now only attack strategic military targets. These can go back to being the King's Wars like they used to be, and not fighting wars of ideology, which is what democracies always do, which is what egalitarian societies always do, because they take on the psychology of we're the good guys and we have the good ideas and we need to export those and bring them to the unwashed masses. Who's got that attitude more than anybody else in the world right now? It ain't the United States, folks. It's Europe. Who was the foreign minister of Europe for 4 years? Joseph Borrell, who called the rest of the world the jungle and the European Union the garden that needed to be protected at all costs. Of course, at all costs meant that I have to pay for it and you have to pay for it. So I take extreme umbrage with the idea that it was an unprovoked attack. So it's not. The Trump administration is being attacked on all sides. It's what I like to call, it's like that scene in Minority Report where we get the orgy of evidence of the guy that Tom Cruise tracks down. That must have been the guy who clearly kidnapped his son and killed him. And there's all this stuff everywhere. And, Colin Farrell walks in and looks at the bed with all the pictures and the this and that and everything else. And went, this is staged. This is an orgy of evidence. This isn't real. And then he figures out that it was clearly staged to be an image system that the precogs in the movie would see, and then set all these things in motion and set all these and then frame. This is how you frame a guy when you've got the ability to see the future, right? So and it's a metaphor. So what's happening across every vector? First, we had Signalgate to target Pete Hegseth. Then we had the Epstein files to go after Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. And during the Iran war, we had them going after Tulsi Gabbard. Remember that? Okay. And now he's going after Obama. Now, Trump has been saying he's going to take Obama down over Russiagate for 10 years, for 9 years now, because he knew then that Obama was behind it. He also knows that Obama is the linchpin to what I would like to call Davos's or City of London's control over our political system. Okay. So it all looks like, yeah, of course it all looks like it's falling apart because that's the freaking goal. But it's not happening. Hegseth, how many times did we hear that Pete Hegseth was going to resign on Friday during Signalgate? How many times? How many times did we hear that? How many times did we hear people coming out of the woodwork to call for Pam Bondi? She needs to be like tarred and feathered and strung up by her toenails and all. Okay. Tulsi Gabbard, she lied. And then Trump got caught on a hot mic saying, responding to the actual question, which is, Director Gabbard said blah, 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 which was not what she said. And he said, well, if she said that, then she doesn't know what she's talking about, knowing clearly that he knew what she said and she didn't say that. But like everything else, hey, let's play the game. Let's play the gotcha game, because that's like British media 101. Now, and then the last thing, of course, is the burying of the Epstein files. And not burying, well, yeah, burying, whatever. It doesn't matter. Epstein is an old depreciating asset. It's a 20-plus-year-old influence peddling and money laundering operation with some sex crimes on top to garner all the headlines when needed, when you're ready to burn the operation or spin it up again to be used again at a moment's notice. Again, I've already told you what the MO is. Why is there a border conflict between India and China? Because the British, when they left India, left a border conflict. And that border conflict has never been really resolved up until very recently. Why? Because the British don't want it to. And every time India and China try to work it out, somehow, some way, somewhere, within 3 days, somebody from MI6 shows up, and then there's people shooting at each other. Okay? Well, I got news for you. It's the same thing with Epstein. Epstein is a dead thing. It's been dead for years. We're all talking about the sex scandals and whether or not Donald Trump has the circumstantial evidence that he was in, that he ever flew on the Lolita Express or whatever. Who cares? Who did he fly with? Why do we know? None of it matters, guys. None of it matters, because what really matters about Epstein is that he was the bag man setting up all the deals to create the thing that we today call Davos. The Clinton Global Initiative and all the money flowing, all of it, the drug running, the child sex trafficking, all of it, and the buying of politicians and the building of this managerial state through influence peddling and managing all of those relationships over time. We're not talking about that. And I got news for you. The Epstein flight logs, which probably don't even exist anymore, and if they do, they've been altered. They're not going to show you any of that. Have you ever noticed how we only ever hear about how many times Bill Clinton has flown on the Lolita Express, on Jeffrey Epstein's private plane, or Bill Gates, but we never find out what dates they flew? That's a tell that the whole thing is just manufactured gaslighting bullshit, trying to distract from what they really did. And the thing is in the past. Now, there's aspects of it that can come out. We've got the grand jury testimony that from Ghislaine Maxwell's trial that they're trying to unseal. And of course, Democrat judges are saying, no, we can't do that. Apparently this morning, as we're doing this, Ghislaine Maxwell is going to testify to the DOJ or chat with the DOJ. That would be nice. Why did the DOJ during the last administration not even talk to the woman? Insane stuff, all pointing to insane levels of corruption and cover up and everything else, because they never thought they would get caught. And now when they know they're going to get caught, what do? They pull out and they dump everything. And they dump an orgy of evidence that Donald Trump doesn't know what the hell he's doing. So as far as giving Netanyahu everything he wants, are the mullahs still in charge in Iran? Yes. They are. The mullahs are still in charge. The IRGC is still operating. It's been neutered, but they're still in charge. Netanyahu wanted regime change. For whom? For his British masters. That's what he wanted. When we sit down to break, this is why at some point you have to kind of break down everything. Every country is not a monolith. Iran has at least 4 different institutions that are all fighting for control over the control of the state. You've got the mullahs themselves as the clerics. You've got their military arm, the IRGC. You got the civilian government, the civilian military. They all work for different people. And what I'm more worried about with Israel and Iran is not that the 12-day war didn't do. What I'm more worried about with Israel and Iran is that what I've always suspected, which is that the British have been supplying both sides. And this is yet another one of their silly tall poppy cleaving operations. And Trump just went in and went, you know what? No, you want to fight? You want to fight? Kids in the back, go ahead. In the back seat, fight it out. Actually, I'll stop the car. You go on the side of the road. You two punch the crap out of each other, and when you're done, you get back in the car so we can go. We can continue on our vacation. But I'm not. But this car's not not moving forward another inch. That's what he did. And in the process, they both got a punch in the mouth. They both got hit hard. Right? Trump took away Israel's casus belli against Iran, or at least he said he did. Right? And now what is Iran doing? Oh, no, we still have a nuclear program. What is Israel doing? Going, hey, they still have a nuclear program. Again, this is evidence of a conflict that someone else doesn't want to end. The Israeli people want this crap over and done with. They just got bombed. Even in Iran's weakened state after Israel's opening salvo, which was pretty damned impressive from a military operation. Again, no fan of Israel, but kudos to the operation. It was a good operation. I hate the fact that MI6 is as good as they are about setting up operations inside Russia. Pisses me off. But you got to hand it to them. They got a bunch of Russia's strategic nuclear bombers. It's an impressive operation. Doesn't mean I like it. Doesn't mean I respect it, or that I like it, or that I think it's good for the world, or not a destabilizing act or anything along those lines. But what happened but Israel had to pull that operation off if they wanted to have any chance at all of not getting wiped off the planet. Because even in their weakened state, Iran proved that they have very strong ballistic missile technology and the capability of sustaining that if Israel hadn't knocked out their air defense, knocked out a lot of their launchers, and had the ability to fly cap over Tehran, so that on successive nights, Iran would shoot over fewer and fewer missiles. Why? You shoot off 200 missiles the first night, send the planes in, bomb the launchers, because now you can see them fire. Boom. Okay, now we knock most of those out. Next night, 100 missiles go over. Boom, knock some of them out, and then 50, then 20, then 10, then 5. That's what we saw strategically. That's what happened. And during the first couple of days of the war, I was sitting there chatting with Dexter White, and privately, and he went, dude, if Iran doesn't do something massive in the next 48 hours, this thing's over. And he was right. But even in that state, Iran put a sincere hurt on Israel. And Trump's response to this was, okay, that's enough. I need you guys to stop pursuing a nuclear weapon and actually get serious about negotiating. And I need the Israelis to calm down. And he came out the other day. He's pissed off with Netanyahu because the guy just wants to bomb everybody into submission. He literally said this the other day. He's like, I gave you what you wanted and you're still not happy. Well, got news for you, dude. I'm moving on from you. So, now he's trying to negotiate with Russia, and he's basically running the same playbook with Russia. If you're serious about negotiating an end to this war, you got 60 days. On day 61, something bad is going to happen. Because in order to get Iran to the table to negotiate, because again, why did that take place? This is important to understand the psychology of the people you're dealing with. Or at the very least, my model of the universe, both sides have backers behind them telling them, push the conflict forward. Now, I'm not accusing Putin of this in the Russia-Ukraine scenario at all. But in the Israel-Iran conflict, I am. I'm saying, no. Same people are on both sides of the conflict saying, no, push. It's okay. Push. You're going to win. When the goal is to get them to fight. And to suck the United States into having to fight a ground war in Iran, which did not happen, right? But a lot of military hardware is expended, and neither of them are really ready to want to go back to war again. It's a good sign for humanity, actually, that all these weapons are being used at a rate that they can't be sustained. So now, if you watch the way Iran was negotiating, I really do believe, in hindsight, it's pretty obvious they were being told, just keep negotiating with Trump. He'll back down. He's a paper tiger. Extend and pretend. Blah 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 blah. And you have to at some point go, nope, that old model doesn't work. We're coming, and I'm going to let him off the leash. It's what he wants to do. I can just say, look, man, I can't stop him. And then, it happened. And the Israelis pulled off what they pulled off. Iran got a punch in the mouth. Israel got punched back in the mouth. Everybody's been properly chastised. Tens of billions of dollars worth of weapons flew around the world, and very few people actually died. At the end of the day, that's temporary strategic disarmament. That's not a bad outcome and as I said from the beginning, my optimal outcome from that was a tie and a lot of injuries. I want both sides strategically weakened so that they can prove to each other they can't sustain a war against the other one. What they want is the conflict. Iran's nuclear program is the forever war. Okay, now let's go over to Ukraine. In Ukraine, situation is murkier and it's more dangerous because the European Union and City of London have been outed as the ones who want the conflict because of the way Russia's run the war and the way Ukraine has had to defend themselves. It's moved us up the escalatory ladder to where we are today, which is the reports that NATO wants to dump 250,000 troops into Ukraine, and if they go in, that's going to mean air cover and all the rest of it. And now we've got a real war. And what's the Russians' response to that? We're going to find out whether the Russians have been lying about how effective their anti-air defense systems are. We're going to find out how good our planes are. I mean, some of the things that we found out in the original attack on Iran is that the F-35 is a better platform than we were led to believe it to be. It's still not good. It's still not what it was advertised to be, but it's a better plane than we thought it was. So everybody who believed that the F-35 was nothing but an unflyable boondoggle, got to update your scripts now, got to update your software, got to update the database. And if they lied to you about that, what else did they lie to you about? And are they lying to you about the S-500s? I don't know. It's in the Russians' best interest to lie about them. It's also in the Russians' best interest to, undersell them. But I think NATO's going to, around and find out. The goal here is to get Trump involved in this. But what Trump has to do is, again, in many ways, do the exact same thing with Putin that he did with Iran, which is why you can, in some ways, can take this threat seriously. Lindsey Graham is playing the job of John Bolton, which is you bring Bolton to negotiations in order to make them think you're serious. Lindsey Graham thinks he's getting one over on Trump. Lindsey Graham is hopping mad that we didn't get regime change in Iran. Lindsey Graham is hopping mad that Trump is not giving Israel everything it wants, which it's not. Trump is very clear. Hey, I'll sell weapons if Europe wants the war that bad, happy to sell you weapons. I'm not giving them to you. We're over that stuff. We're not doing that anymore. We're not active members of this conflict, but we'll sell you the weapons. And you can pay us because you owe us all. Because in Trump's mind, they owe us trillions of dollars. And what I mean by that, that he knows that they owe us trillions of dollars for defending them in World War II, and then the birth of the Eurodollar system, which hollowed out our freaking country. While they systemically took over our government and stabbed it with traitors. So, yeah. No, dude, like it's if anything, it's the exact opposite. Actually, Trump is handling this as well as you can expect under the circumstances. It's a war. No plan survives contact with the enemy. you have to do you've got planning and you've got improvisation. And what I see is him trying strategically to take away their advantages and neutralize their advantages as much as possible. And they're trying to do the same thing to him. So they go after his base, which is where his political power comes from at every level. So since July 14th, they've been trying to cleave the libertarians off from the day after they tried to shoot him in Butler, Pennsylvania. Like, I'm sorry, dude. And the libertarians are easy because they've all got oppositional defiance syndrome. Like, no, man, I don't trust anything. Like, okay, fine. Well, then what do you believe in? Well, I don't believe in that. Well, then you don't believe in anything. And what we're finding out is what people actually believe in. And we find out that they don't believe in anything other than I hate America. And this is the thing about this discussion this morning. After I read your the questions, I went, this point needs to be made, and it needs to be made hard. For everybody who hates America and is really angry with all the things that we've done over the last 80 years, and I'm one of them, what do you actually want? I'm asking a very serious question. It's kind of rhetorical because I'm going to answer what it is that I think you want. Here's the point. Here's the thing. Simultaneously, they want us to take responsibility for everything bad that's happened to the world over the last 85 years since the end of World War, 80 years since the end of World War II, and at the same time, solve everybody's problems for them as well. While letting off the hook everybody who created World War II in the first place, that we came in and with the help of the Russians, put down. Like, you can't have it both ways. You don't get to blame us for fucking everything and at the same time look to us to solve your problems for you. Because that's what's going on. You can't criticize, and moreover, you can't criticize. You can criticize, but you can't criticize everything we try and do to then try to solve the problems going forward. You can't continually legislate history and then complain about how it is that you get out from underneath the problems that have been created today, when clearly everybody was involved in the creation of the current situation, and no one ever. I'm over all this moral preening that no one, that this comes, and it really bothers me. It comes mostly from European commentators, but the American self-haters are so, it's so deeply ingrained. It's not even funny. Like, they don't have an answer to how to solve the problem. All they know how to do is criticize how the guy who's trying to solve the problem is doing it. And you can't, that's a space look, that makes for great content on YouTube, but it doesn't make for good analysis. And if that puts me in the minority in the commentary space, I'm happy to be there. I was there 4 years ago when I was like the only person out there literally screaming, no, Powell's draining the Eurodollar system. I think I've earned the right to say it this way, which is, yes, America has a lot of sins to expiate, a lot of them, and I want to see them happen, but you can't make us pay for all of them and at the same time starve us of the ability and the agency to actually solve the problems that you want us to solve. That's an untenable position. That is yet another one of these never-ending conflicts, but they're happening now at the cultural level, at the political level. Again, who triangulates people like this? We don't. We don't act that way at all. We just go in and bomb people. We spend very little time triangulating. The CIA is bad at it. MI6 is better at it. But as a country, we don't do a lot of triangulation in the classic narcissistic fugue. But the British certainly do. The French do it. And this is, we've got to get a better understanding of what the actual dynamics are. I think Trump, and this is a long answer, but I think Trump is doing everything he can to fix the big picture. And the big picture is the monetary system, the tax system, all of that. The old economic system based on central banks, debt, and tax slavery with an unanswerable political oligarchy that's removed from, any comeuppance other than the guillotine when things get really bad every 85 years or so. That's the model that Europe wants us to have. That's the model that, that they're trying to stave off, and they want us to pay for it. And we're like, no, we're not going to do it. And I think that's what he's trying to do. And I think the path there is at times going to look contradictory. But I, in no way, manner, shape, or form do I see the, oh, well, the Epstein files are bad, so hey, let's go after Obama. No, that's not cover up, dude. That's called move, counter move. This is chess. They pulled the Epstein thing in the wake of the 12-day war. They pulled the Epstein thing. Trump's mistake was ever using it as a campaign promise and a campaign pledge. That was his mistake. And he fell into the trap, and then they sprung it on him. So you know what? Fuck you. I'm going after Obama. I'm going after Clinton. I'm going after Clapper and Comey and Brennan and all of these friggin' traitors. I've got them all dead to rights. We have all the friggin' information, and now we're going to go after them. Lawyer up. And, okay, you get it done. And even if Obama doesn't go to jail, which he probably won't, Brennan will wind up in a non-extradition treaty country and then quietly fed some Americium and be done with it. They're all these guys are going to wind up dead. I think about it off the top of my head. Because what you're watching now, you're already watching the cover-up of everything. You're starting to see it happen. You're starting to see the how can we get out from underneath this? Who needs to die now? That's next. So let's watch that. But Obama's gonna, but Obama's also expendable, I think, in some ways. So we'll see what happens. But I know what Davos's next plan is, or what Britain will do, which is to then try and foment a race war here in the United States over Obama. Oh, you just went after Obama because he's black. No, I went after Obama because he tried to put me in jail. But, what else is new? Excuse me. So that's where I think, that's where I am. And that informs everything else that I'm thinking about right now.
Yeah, great answer. A lot to think about. You've given me some new things to think about. I agree that the Epstein thing does seem like a distraction. But I think the main crux of it was the whole Pam Bondi interview where she was saying, we have all this information we have truckloads of files. It's all going to come out. We're going to make sure and then they redacted that and essentially said, oh, we can't release it now. I think that was kind of the fuel for the fire here. If there had been no talk of it and people started demanding release the files and Trump was like, I don't want to, or we can't for whatever reason, I don't think the controversy would have gotten to this point.
No, I agree with you. I'm not saying that they handled this well. I think they handled it very poorly. Okay, and I probably already lost half the audience over this shit in the first place. But I'm dead serious when I say, should have probably led with that. Oh, by the way, they handled the Epstein thing poorly, but this is what it means. Should have probably led with that. Oh well. They have handled it poorly. But it was a trap. Remember, they went in with the best of intentions to say, we're going to shed light on everything. They told everybody what was going to happen. They told their opposition what was going to happen. One of the things that I've been thinking about, it's part of me is why don't you believe that Trump, that they wouldn't have doctored the evidence? Why would you not believe that? These people perpetrated one of the greatest hoaxes in U.S. political history. Russiagate is 45 to it's orders of magnitude worse than Watergate. It makes anything that Nixon did child's play. It's affected an entire decade of U.S. foreign policy. It's resulted in the death of 1.5 million Slavs in Ukraine. And we're supposed to just, oh, it's just a thing. Because we all live in our heads, yelling at each other on social media. Like, no, this is vile. This is not, this is, and it's far, and again, Epstein is part of that, of course. And at some point in the future, all that's going to come out as well. But these are crimes you're not going to be able to prosecute, like JFK. Did we not learn anything from the release of the JFK files? Yeah, you guys, all you, open source intelligence guys, you got it right. You figured it out. You missed this part of the story and that part of the story and that part of the story. But for the most part, 97% of your thing, yeah. We already knew. We know what went on with Epstein. And I'm going to just say, look, man, if the victims don't want to relitigate this, let it go and move on, and let's stop the next child from being trafficked. Again, Epstein's operation is 20 years dead. Everybody thinks there's more of an influence, a political influence campaign behind this than there probably is. I don't know, but the longer this goes on and festers the way it does, the less I believe what I used to believe about Epstein, which was that it was, a big influence peddling operation to bind people down and get them to vote the way they wanted to. I don't know that that's actually the case. Maybe that's part of it. I'm sure it is part of it. And I'm sure there's some people who were particularly vulnerable to this. But we can't see their behavior? Like what? I don't know. Wouldn't it be better to indemnify the people in those files and move them over to your side by saying, look, we're going to take a punch in the mouth on this one, and we're going to stop dragging your name through the mud, but you don't have to worry about this ever coming out again? Putting it to bed so that you can do your job. And I'm now speaking in metaphor for John Roberts. Notice how the Supreme Court has all of a sudden found its ability to read the Constitution. I wonder why. Again, when you're dealing with evil people, right, you're never going to get a clean victory. We all want the clean victory. We all watch too many friggin' movies, myself included. I love a good narrative where, good wins and evil's punished. And we all, have that cathartic moment where the guy walks through the valley of death and, and hell, Linda Hamilton says, you're terminated. And, we're happy with that. We want those moments. It's great. It's good psychology. It's not real politics. Everything is usually closer to Chinatown, which is why Chinatown's such a brilliant movie and why it's so hard for people to watch. Right? So, ambiguous endings where the bad guys kind of get away with it, but, or are thwarted in today's plans, but live to, set in motion tomorrow's plans. I know that doesn't sit well with a lot of people. And we have an anxiety generation engine system that's designed to drive us all crazy, to seed the world with fake information. And God, I haven't even begun to even consider how bad AI is going to make all of our jobs going forward. Okay, so all of everything we've already talked about this morning. I mean, at the end of the day, like half of the stuff that we read isn't even real. We think we know anymore isn't even real. And the AIs are going to get trained on bullshit, and then they're going to repeat bullshit, and then we're going to it's going to get truly and unutterably insane. And it's And none of us who have built up all of these skills in it, being able to read the media or read the politics or read the game board or anything else, we're all vulnerable to using old heuristics as predictive tools. All of us. And that includes me, it includes everyone. And I'm actually, I actually want to get past this period of history and trying to like figure out who was right and who was wrong about all this crap, and start talking about the real future, which is that we all need to be talking less, reflecting more, and then having real good conversations. And myself included. And not for any other reason than it's going to take a lot of intestinal fortitude to not be drawn into the endocrine hit, the dopamine hit. And I'm just, this is where my head is at right now, Jesse. But yeah, it's bad, man. So like when like the markets are fake and gay, the politics is fake and gay, everything's fake and gay, right? So I mean, I'm just like let's try and put some of this stuff to bed. Let's just live with the ambiguity of it, and trust in the fact. This is in many ways what Scott Adams said during the whole Epstein thing. He was right. And for as long as Scott's around, and especially this version of Scott Adams, let's hope this version of Scott Adams lasts a lot longer than the one that lost his mind during COVID. But that's what he was saying. He's like, what are you willing to pay to get this done? To let the Epstein files, shine all this disinfectant on it. No one would find out about it. Do we take down good people who are like trapped by circumstantial evidence? Do we, turn everything over to the mob of, the reaction, the confirmation bias generation engine, which is what we're doing? Like everybody's got confirmation bias, myself included. I know, I understand that. But as opposed to reinforcing that by letting a bunch of old intelligence data ages like fish. I'm cribbing from the great Bruce Campbell on this. One day he said, years ago, somebody asked him, man, is there going to be a jack of all trades revival? And he, no, man, old TV shows age like fish. And I'm like, greatest line ever. And I think a lot of intelligence stuff is the same way. I think it just ages badly because, it's subject to compromise and redaction and shredding. And, people are good at covering their tracks. So, I can easily believe that they doctored the Epstein files in order to put Trump in there in such a way that it'll be bad for him. And then, he fell into the trap and went, oh shit, you know what? Gravity works. I'm out of here. We're not doing this. And he's Donald Trump, and it's one of his failures as a human being that he doesn't like to be embarrassed. And they used it against him. They use his strengths and his weaknesses against him because that's what you do when you have an enemy. And we know who Donald Trump's enemy is. So why should we abreact every time, they get one over on him? Like, he's not perfect. And I'm not perfect. I don't make, I throw a lot of shit at the wall and hope a lot of it sticks, right? So, and the stuff that sticks, I work with, and the stuff that didn't stick, you discard and you move forward with, right? But, that's that. That's the way it's supposed to be. So yeah, I'm like, but they're trying to do the same thing now with Obama and Obamagate. I'm like, no. This has to be. This is for all the marbles. This is for what survives of the United States Republic going into the 2030s, right? This has to be dealt with now. I still don't. I'm still on the. I'm a coin flip as to whether or not the United States lasts 10 years in its current form. But I can tell you that the European Union ain't going to last 5. Right? And there's always a good chance that China doesn't last either in its current configuration, or even Russia. Like, there's a lot of big countries and a lot of big economic blocs that that were built with the Eurodollar system in many ways, it's going to end. And there's going to be a lot of splintering and a lot of map redrawing over the course of the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Well, let's move over to the EU and talk about their planned rollout of the digital euro, as well as their Readiness 2030 proposal. You wrote on X, with their Readiness 2030, the EU Commission will get both tax and spend, as well as bond issuance authority, which will force the issued bonds onto investors and banks in the EU. This is a recipe for complete disaster. They're doing this because they know there is no capital left in Europe. We are seeing, of course, not only tightening capital controls, but tightening speech controls in the EU, with it now being the norm for people to be arrested or at the very least threatened by the government for posting content online that goes against the party line. Is this all connected? And you mentioned you think that the EU won't last 5 years. What do you see as the main catalyst driving the collapse of the EU?
Well, clearly a sovereign debt crisis that they're trying to stave off. I think what they're doing now is controlled demolition. They're certainly doing controlled demolition of the UK for having the temerity to vote for Brexit 9 years ago, and Keir Starmer was brought in to literally do just that. This is an interesting turn. The British press has started to take a right turn in the last week and a half since Tulsi Gabbard went to London. Interestingly enough. I don't know what it means yet, but there's some interesting stuff there. It could spin into something very, very cool. But we're dealing with, they know that they have a sovereign debt crisis. They know they've got, all this debt that's way overpriced. They've got a shrinking economy. They've got a shrinking capital base. They've got shrinking collateral base. They're losing the war in Ukraine. France is losing the Sahel region of Africa. They're now reduced to doing open piracy on the high seas and, on the Northern Sea route. This is bad. So what are they doing? They're trying to roll, as they always have, the 27 members up into one political authority centralized in Brussels. They want to create another Washington, D.C., or another City of London, or another Vatican. That's been their, it's been their MO in the past. Why would they not do so? And then what will happen after that? They will then remove Brussels from the European Union so that they can exist as a separate administrative state, with a different legal system. Again, just like City of London, just like Washington, D.C., right? And what they fear is that they know that they can't pull that off without forcing the population into desperation. Okay, the way you get that done is through making people so desperate, and we're going to watch this psychodrama play out in the UK. Unless Trump comes in to save the UK by literally helping to throw Keir Starmer out, get rid of Charles, put William back on the throne, which is, again, why I think it's interesting why the British press is beginning to turn. And I do believe that that's part of Trump's strategy. I do believe he's trying to save the Commonwealth. I always thought he was a royalist. And he's a mercantilist and a shitbag property developer from Queens and all the other things that Donald Trump is. But I've always believed this about him. I don't have, a lot of great data here. I have just instincts, right? So I throw it out there for people to chew on and think about. But in Europe, they have to go for the single political authority. Okay, they have to go to the single bond issuer. They have to. But most of Europe doesn't want it. And if the United States is able to wriggle itself out from underneath European political and economic control, and again, this ties into why is he going after Obama? It's nothing to do with Epstein. It has everything to do with destroying Obama's influence peddling system, because Obama's still the one running a shadow government in the in DC, telling the European Union, Don't worry. I've got everything ring fenced. We can wait Trump out. He's going to be gone. We'll get control. We'll neuter him at the midterms, and then we'll get back to business in 2029. That's what they think in Europe. Martin Armstrong's been talking about this every day for months now, and I believe Marty on stuff like this. So I also believe Marty has been told that, hey, they're in order to make this happen, they will, drop a quarter million troops into Ukraine and try and start World War III and force Putin up the escalatory ladder where he has to nuke somebody. Okay? Because that's the way that vector of the game plays out, right? That portion of the game plays out like that. At the same time, what are they doing? Knowing full well that that's what's going to happen, they've got to get everybody to a point where they're ready to accept in a potential sovereign debt default, to accept political integration that most of the countries in the EU don't want, and we're not sold. And how are they going to do that? They have to do it by making things so bad that this looks like the only potential solution. So between the Savings and Investment Union, which we still don't know anything about, I asked Rock about this the other day. They made this big announcement. No details, zero. You think the Fed is bad about coming forth with details about their policy? We have no idea what these people are thinking, but you can pretty much figure it out. They're going to force through the structures they're putting in place today. They're going to force pensions and insurance companies and everyone else to buy the new debt that's coming, and they're going to default on the old debt, and they're going to bring in the digital euro, and that's what they're going to do. And I think it's going to be a disaster. And I think von der Satan and the rest of them have no idea what's coming. And it's why it's more, and when you frame it all that way, it's why it's more imperative than ever that Trump wins every one of his political battles, or every political battle that he wins, geopolitical or domestic, is another, it's another dart. I can't call them bullets to take this beast down, but it's another. It's like the matador with the spears and the bull. You've got to get 10 or 20 of them in there until he can finally run the bull out. Right. This is what he has to do, and it's a very we're still dealing with a very dangerous enemy that has a lot of weapons in the quiver, but. Arrows in the quiver, but at the same time, you neuter MI6, you neuter, you neuter all those people, you neuter that center of things, and you go after City of London's ability to rig the gold and silver markets and commodity markets, and it's more. I mean, everybody talks about gold and silver, but the rigging in the oil markets are the insane thing. Like Brent crude contract makes no sense. It's the most volatile major market in the world. On a weekly basis, the oil is as a percentage of price. Oil is nearly twice as volatile as Bitcoin. Okay, 7% is the average range of barrel of oil every week relative to its price. 7%, folks. The Dow is like 1.75. Gold is like 2%. The gold is like 1.75. So it's hilarious. The BIS always says, "Oh, we can't have gold as a tier 1 asset because it's too volatile." It's like the least volatile of all the assets. Silver's like 4. Bitcoin's like 4.5. Like the only thing more volatile than oil, I think, is natural gas. U.S. natural gas. And that's also a horribly manipulated market. So, so what they fear ultimately is losing in the United States. And so that's why they have to move forward with these plans, even though they're not ready for them. I just don't think they're ready. I don't think the digital euro is ready at all. I don't. But hey, they're just now going out with edicts saying, you can't move more than $1,000. It's be illegal to move more than $1,000 outside the banking system or this, that, or anything else. Meanwhile, the United States just took away capital gains tax reporting for all crypto transactions under $600, and most likely will get rid of capital gains tax completely, which is an offensive tax in the first place because you're taxing income that was already taxed. It's unconstitutional. Capital gains tax is fundamentally unconstitutional. Fundamentally. You want to talk about a restoration of a constructionist court. Yeah. Strike down capital gains tax and then watch the court go, yeah, it's double taxation.
Well, Tom, this has been a fantastic conversation. Tell us about the Gold, Goats, and Guns blog and podcast.
Sure. The blog is mostly now just a repository for the newsletter announcements and the podcast itself. The podcast comes out on a infrequent basis. I was out on vacation for a couple of weeks, so July was a little thin, but we're going to get back to it. I have a good list of guests coming up in August. I've already lined up a bunch of people. That's over at goldgoatsandguns.com or tomluongo.me. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. And you can sign up at Patreon for Patreon/goldgoatsandguns for the monthly newsletter and the twice weekly market reports where I rant into a microphone and do the technical breakdown of all of the important markets and try and tie it all back together, the markets to the geopolitics, to the domestic politics and the culture. So it's what we do. And I think we do it pretty well. One last thing on the way out the door. This is a point that I want to make on the way out the door, which is very important. The word price discovery should be in everybody's head right now. We think we don't have any price discovery in equity markets, bond markets, this, that, and everything else. We're beginning to get price discovery in all markets. And that means political markets. It means informational markets. It means gas, even to a lesser extent, capital markets. That is what we're dealing with. We're finding out what all this stuff is actually worth, who's actually doing it, and why, and everything's in flux. And so right now, it's what Amos Burton and the Expanse called the churn. That's what we're in right now. And we're going to find out, who can survive it and who can't. And it won't mean much if any of us survive or any of us don't survive it, frankly, because it's just what happens when old systems die and new paradigms are introduced. The chaos unleashed is not predictable. And we have to be willing and humble enough to believe that we don't have a crystal ball. And so, that's where I'm headed as a commentator. That's where I'm going to be moving back towards. But I'm really going to be moving back into that space and to try and reinforce that idea over and over again. We don't know what's going on. And information and good information is going to be harder and harder to come by. So
fantastic. I'll put links to the blog, podcast, Patreon, your X account, all in the description below for people who want to follow along with your work. Thank you once again, Tom. It's always a blast speaking with you.
Appreciate it, Jesse. Have a good day now.
Thank you for joining us. Take advantage of ARC Silver Gold Osmium specials right now. Silver Kangaroos 2023 1-ounce coins, $2.47 over spot. Silver Maple Leafs 2025 1-ounce coins, just $2.87 over spot. While supplies last. Reach out to owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And be sure to pick up your Commodity Culture hat, t-shirt, hoodie, or mug using the link in the description below, all backed by a 100% quality guarantee. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.